The Galactic Grand Hotel floated in the neutral zone between 7 star systems, a marvel of engineering that catered to the most powerful beings in the known universe. Its crystalline spires twisted through space like frozen lightning, while its gravity fields maintained perfect atmospheric conditions for over 300 different species. Today, however, the staff moved with unusual tension. Emperor Vexthul of the Crimson Fleet paced the marble floors of the main lobby, his forearms gesticulating wildly as he spoke into his communication device. The insectoid ruler's chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the soft lighting, but his compound eyes betrayed deep concern. Nearby, Ambassador Krell from the Silicon Coalition stood motionless, his rock-like features somehow managing to convey anxiety. "She's been in the penthouse suite for 6 hours, Vexthul hissed, his translator converting his clicking sounds into standard galactic. 6 hours without saying a word to anyone. "Do you understand what this means?" Ambassador Krell's response rumbled like distant thunder. "The Dragon Empress has never remained silent this long during negotiations. Our trade agreements hang in the balance." The reason for their worry occupied the hotel's most luxurious suite, a space designed to accommodate beings of immense power and equally immense ego. The Dragon Empress, known throughout the galaxy as Zarathus the Eternal, sat motionless on a platform that hovered 3 meters above the floor. Her massive form stretched nearly 20 meters from snout to tail, covered in scales that shifted color like oil on water. Each scale was larger than a dinner plate, and her eyes burned with the light of dying stars. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Hotel manager Quillix, a nervous Zephyrian with pale blue skin and multiple tentacles for arms, wrung his appendages as he watched the security feeds. His establishment had hosted galactic royalty, interdimensional beings, and even the notorious void merchants, but nothing had prepared him for this situation. "Sir," his assistant squeaked, "the Dragon Empress hasn't moved in hours. She won't respond to any communication attempts. The other delegates are getting restless." Quillix's skin shifted to a worried purple. "Have we tried everything? The universal translator array? The empathic communication grid?" "Everything, sir. It's as if she's stuck somehow." The truth was more complicated than anyone realized. The Dragon Empress had arrived that morning in spectacular fashion, her personal dreadnought appearing in a burst of crimson fire that temporarily blinded every sensor in the system. She had emerged from her ship with the regal bearing that had made her legendary across 12 galaxies, her presence so overwhelming that several delegates had immediately offered to surrender their negotiating positions. But when the formal negotiations began, something unprecedented happened. The Dragon Empress had suddenly stopped speaking mid-sentence, her great head tilting as if listening to something no one else could hear. Her massive form had gone rigid, and she had retreated to her suite without explanation, leaving behind a room full of confused and increasingly agitated galactic representatives. Hours passed. The hotel's best xenolinguist tried to communicate with her. The galaxy's most respected diplomatic corps attempted to reach her through every known communication method. Nothing worked. The Dragon Empress remained as still and silent as a mountain, her burning eyes fixed on some distant point that only she could see. In the hotel's service levels, far below the glittering diplomatic suites, a different kind of concern was growing. The staff quarters hummed with worried conversations in dozens of languages, as workers from across the galaxy tried to understand what was happening. Most were content to let their superiors handle the situation. But one figure moved through the corridors with purposeful determination. Marcus Chen had worked at the Galactic Grand Hotel for 3 years, ever since the terraform collapse on his home colony had left him without a place in the universe. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, barely 2 centuries since first contact, and they were often overlooked in favor of species with more obvious talents. Marcus had found his niche in the hotel's maintenance department, where his problem-solving abilities and willingness to work in dangerous conditions made him valuable. But Marcus had a secret that made him unique among the hotel's staff. During his youth on the frontier colony of New Shanghai, he had been exposed to something that would prove invaluable today, though he had never imagined it could matter on such a scale. As he made his way through the service corridors, Marcus remembered his childhood among the deep space mining crews. The colony had attracted beings from throughout the galaxy, all seeking fortune in the asteroid fields. Among them had been a small community of dragon folk, distant cousins of the great dragon Empress. They had been outcasts from their own society, refugees who had lost their homeworld to a stellar catastrophe centuries earlier. These dragon folk had taken an interest in the young human boy, who showed them kindness when others feared or ignored them. They had taught him their ancient language, not the formal diplomatic tongue that the Dragon Empress used in official settings, but the old speech that connected all dragons across space and time. It was a language of emotion and memory, of shared experience that transcended mere words. Marcus had never expected to use this knowledge again. The dragon folk had moved on when the mining played out, and he had carried their lessons like a half-forgotten dream. But now, as he stood in the service elevator rising toward the penthouse level, those ancient words stirred in his memory like embers coming back to life. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the penthouse level. Marcus stepped out into a corridor filled with nervous energy. Diplomatic security forces lined the walls, their weapons powered down but ready. Through the massive doors at the end of the hall, he could sense something that made his skin prickle with recognition. The Dragon Empress was not simply being difficult or mysterious. She was in distress, calling out in a language that no one else in the galaxy could understand, trapped in a communication barrier that her incredible power could not break. And Marcus Chen, a simple human maintenance worker, might be the only being in 7 star systems who could hear what she was really saying. He approached the security checkpoint, his maintenance credentials dangling from his uniform. The guards barely glanced at him as he passed, their attention focused on more obvious threats. After all, what harm could one human do? Marcus paused at the massive doors leading to the Dragon Empress's suite, his hand hovering over the access panel. Beyond those doors waited one of the most powerful beings in the universe, and he was about to walk into her presence armed with nothing but fragments of an ancient language and a maintenance worker's determination to solve problems. He pressed the panel and stepped forward into a moment that would change everything. The penthouse suite stretched before Marcus like a cathedral designed for gods. The ceiling arched 60 meters overhead, supported by pillars of crystallized starlight that hummed with barely contained energy. The air itself seemed thick with power, making his human lungs work harder with each breath. But all of this faded into insignificance when he saw the Dragon Empress. Zarathes the Eternal filled the center of the vast space, her massive form coiled in what Marcus recognized as a defensive posture. Her scales, which had appeared magnificent on the security feeds, now revealed themselves as something far more complex. They shifted through colors that had no names in any human language, reflecting emotions and memories in patterns that spoke directly to something deep in his consciousness. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Those burning orbs, each larger than his entire head, were fixed on a point somewhere beyond the physical walls of the suite. They held an expression that Marcus had never expected to see in such a powerful being. Profound, desperate loneliness. "Your Majesty," Marcus said quietly, using the standard galactic greeting. His voice sounded absurdly small in the enormous space. The Dragon Empress did not respond. Her great head remained motionless, though her nostrils flared slightly as she caught his scent. Marcus could see the tension in her massive muscles, the way her claws had unconsciously extended to scratch deep furrows in the reinforced flooring. Marcus closed his eyes and reached back into his memories, searching for the lessons the dragon folk had taught him so many years ago. They had explained that dragons experienced language differently than most species. For them, communication was not just about conveying information, but about sharing the very essence of experience itself. When he opened his eyes again, he spoke in the ancient dragon tongue, his human vocal cords struggling to produce the complex harmonics required. "Honored ancestor, this small one hears the song of your sorrow." The effect was instantaneous and dramatic. Zarathus's massive head snapped toward him, her star-bright eyes widening with shock. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as her attention focused entirely on the small human, who had somehow spoken words she had never expected to hear again. "Impossible," she whispered, and her voice was like distant thunder rolling across mountains. When she spoke in the ancient tongue, her words carried harmonics that resonated in Marcus's bones. No outsider has spoken the deep language for 1,000 years. "Who are you, small warm blood?" Marcus felt sweat beating on his forehead, but he forced himself to remain calm. He could sense the incredible restraint the Dragon Empress was exercising. One careless movement from her could reduce him to atoms. Yet she held herself with the precision of a master craftsman handling the most delicate materials. "I am Marcus Chen, descendant of the scattered peoples," he replied, using the formal introduction the dragon folk had taught him. "I learned the deep language from the exile children of Keth Morris, who found kindness among the star miners of the Outer Rim." At the mention of Keth Morris, Zarathus's entire demeanor changed. Her massive form seemed to collapse inward, and for a moment, the most powerful being in 7-star systems looked incredibly fragile. "Keth Morris," she repeated, and the word carried such weight of grief that Marcus felt tears spring to his eyes. "My birth world, my people, gone these 800 years, and still I carry their memory like a burning coal in my chest." Marcus understood now. The Dragon Empress had come to this negotiation carrying a burden that no one else could comprehend. While the galactic representative saw her as an immortal force of nature, she was also the last of her kind, carrying the weight of an entire civilization's history in her vast memory. "The exile children spoke of you," Marcus said gently. "They called you the keeper of all songs, the one who remembers what others have forgotten. They said you carried not just your own memories, but the memories of millions." "And that is my curse," Zarathus replied, her voice dropping to a whisper that still somehow filled the enormous room. "Do you know what it is like, small one, to be the only one who remembers? To carry the voices of the dead, their hopes and dreams and final words, while surrounded by beings who see only power and conquest." Marcus thought of his own lost colony, the terraform failure that had scattered his people across the galaxy like seeds on the cosmic wind. His loss was tiny compared to hers, but it was still loss, and it gave him a bridge of understanding. "I know a little," he said, "enough to recognize the song of mourning when I hear it." The Dragon Empress lowered her massive head until it was only a few meters from where Marcus stood. He could feel the heat radiating from her scales, could see his own reflection in those ancient eyes. "The others," she said, "they come to me with their treaties and trade agreements, their wars and conquests. They speak of territory and resources, of power and influence, but none of them understand that every decision I make echoes with the voices of the dead. Every choice carries the weight of promises made to those who can no longer speak for themselves." "Is that why you stopped speaking during the negotiations?" Marcus asked. Zarathus's laugh was bitter, a sound like avalanches in distant mountains. They were discussing the mineral rights to the Kepler Nebula. They spoke of it as empty space ripe for exploitation. "But that nebula," her voice broke slightly, "that nebula contains the scattered ashes of 17 worlds that my people once called home. They wanted me to sign away the graves of my ancestors as if they were nothing more than economic resources." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he began to understand the true scope of the situation. This wasn't just about trade negotiations or diplomatic protocol. The Dragon Empress had been asked to commodify the memory of her entire species. "But you couldn't explain this to them," he said. "How could I? They do not speak the deep language. They cannot understand the concept of ancestor duty or the weight of collective memory. In their languages, there are no words for what I carry, no way to express the responsibility of being the last witness to a civilization's dreams." The massive chamber fell silent, except for the subtle hum of the hotel's life support systems. Marcus could feel the weight of millennia pressing down on them both. The accumulated sorrow of an immortal being who had watched everything she loved turn to dust. "What if," Marcus said slowly, "what if there was a way to help them understand? Not the deep language itself, but the meaning behind it?" Zarathus's eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you suggesting, small warm blood?" "The other delegates," Marcus said, his mind racing as he spoke. "They're not evil. They're just limited. They see you as a force of nature, something to be negotiated with or appeased. But what if they could see you as you really are? Not the Dragon Empress, the political entity, but Zarathus, the last keeper of her people's memory. And how would you accomplish this miracle of understanding?" Marcus smiled, and for the first time since entering the suite, he felt confident. "By doing what humans do best, Your Majesty. By building bridges between impossible differences. By taking something that seems untranslatable and finding a way to make it understood." The Dragon Empress regarded him with an expression that might have been curiosity. "You would risk your life for this? You who have no stake in these negotiations?" "Everyone has a stake in preventing misunderstanding," Marcus replied. "Besides, I've learned that the universe is smaller than it seems. The exiled children of Keth Morris taught me that memory is precious, that keeping the voices of the past alive is one of the most important jobs anyone can have. Maybe it's time for the rest of the galaxy to learn that lesson too. For the first time in hours, Zarathis moved. She lifted her great head and looked toward the sealed doors of the suite, beyond which waited the assembled representatives of 7 star systems. "Very well, Marcus Chen of the Scattered Peoples," she said. "Show me how humans build their bridges." The main conference hall of the Galactic Grand Hotel buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from across 7 star systems waited for the Dragon Empress to return. The massive chamber, designed to accommodate beings of vastly different sizes and environmental needs, felt oppressive despite its grandeur. Atmospheric processors hummed quietly, maintaining the delicate balance of gases and pressures needed for the diverse assembly. Emperor Vexthul clicked his mandibles anxiously while Ambassador Krell's rocky features had darkened to the color of storm clouds. Other delegates representing species from silicon-based crystalline entities to energy beings that flickered like living flames maintained their own versions of diplomatic composure while radiating unmistakable tension. "This is unprecedented," muttered Chancellor Rixta. Her serpentine form coiled around a specialized hover platform. "The Dragon Empress has never withdrawn from negotiations without explanation." "Perhaps," suggested Trade Minister Korth, his gelatinous form rippling with concern, "we should consider postponing until she recovers from whatever ailment has affected her." Before anyone could respond, the massive doors at the far end of the chamber began to open. But instead of the Dragon Empress making her traditional dramatic entrance, a small figure walked through first. The delegates leaned forward, trying to identify this unexpected development. Marcus Chen stepped into the hall with steady confidence, though his heart hammered against his ribs. Behind him, the Dragon Empress moved with careful, measured steps, her massive form somehow seeming less imposing than before. She had asked him to lead, to show the others that this moment was different from their usual diplomatic theater. "Honored delegates," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly in the acoustically perfect chamber. "I am Marcus Chen, a member of this hotel's staff. I have been asked to serve as cultural interpreter for Her Majesty, Zarathis the Eternal." The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Several delegates began speaking at once, their translators creating a cacophony of overlapping protests. Emperor Vexthul's 4 arms gestured wildly as he demanded to know what kind of insult this represented, while Ambassador Krell's rumbling voice expressed outrage that a mere service worker would dare address them. The Dragon Empress moved forward, and her presence filled the chamber like a gathering storm. "Silence," she said, and though she spoke quietly, her voice carried absolute authority. The delegates fell quiet immediately, though their agitation remained visible. "Marcus Chen speaks for me in this matter," Zarathis continued. "He alone among you has demonstrated the ability to understand what I am about to explain." Chancellor Rixta's hood flared with indignation. "Your Majesty, surely you cannot expect us to conduct interstellar negotiations through a maintenance worker?" Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the chamber. But he also felt something else, the warm presence of the Dragon Empress behind him, and the memory of the dragon folk who had taught him that wisdom could come from unexpected sources. "Before we continue," Marcus said calmly, "I'd like to share something with all of you. A story, if you will." He activated the chamber's holographic display system, calling up an image that made several delegates gasp in recognition. The 3-dimensional projection showed a star map of the Kepler Nebula, its swirling gases painted in shades of gold and crimson. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Marcus said. "Rich in rare minerals, perfect for deep space mining operations, completely uninhabited. At least that's what our surveys tell us." Trade Minister Korth's form rippled with interest. Indeed, the potential profits from that region could fund expansion into 3 additional sectors. "But what if I told you," Marcus continued, "that you're looking at a graveyard?" The chamber fell silent. Marcus expanded the holographic display, and suddenly the nebula was filled with tiny points of light, each one marking a specific location within the swirling gases. "Each of these points represents a world that once supported life," Marcus explained. 17 planets home to billions of beings who had families, dreams, cultures, and histories as rich and complex as any of ours. Ambassador Krell's voice rumbled with confusion. "That's impossible. Our archaeological surveys found no evidence of previous habitation." "Because?" said the Dragon Empress, speaking for the first time since entering the chamber. They were my people, and when our son began to die, we had time to choose how we would face the end. Marcus watched as understanding began to dawn on several faces in the audience. The dragon civilization possessed technology we can barely imagine. When they realized their worlds were doomed, they chose to preserve what mattered most: their memories, their culture, their essential selves. They encoded everything into the quantum structure of matter itself, then dispersed those encoded memories into space. The Kepler Nebula isn't just gas and minerals, Marcus continued. It's the physical embodiment of an entire civilization's collective memory. Every particle contains fragments of stories, songs, scientific discoveries, works of art, and personal moments that someone thought was worth preserving. The silence in the chamber was profound. Several delegates looked between Marcus, the Dragon Empress, and the swirling hologram with dawning comprehension. "And Her Majesty," Marcus said gently, "is the living key to that archive. She doesn't just remember her people's history. She is the guardian of their entire legacy, the only being in the universe who can access and interpret what they left behind." Emperor Vexthol's mandibles clicked slowly. "You're saying we were asking her to approve mining operations in the scattered remains of her entire species," Marcus finished. "Imagine if someone asked you to sign a contract permitting the strip mining of your family cemetery, your cultural archives, and your most sacred sites all at once." Chancellor Rixta's serpentine form had gone completely still. But why didn't she simply explain this during negotiations? The Dragon Empress spoke, her voice carrying new harmonics of sadness and hope. "Because in all your languages there are no words for what I carry. Your species think in terms of individual memory, personal experience. You have no concept for collective consciousness, for the weight of being responsible for preserving the dreams of billions. But humans do," Marcus added. "We may not have the same long lifespans or vast mental capacities as other species, but we've always been good at one thing: understanding that everyone's story matters. We've built our entire civilization on the idea that preserving memory and sharing it with others is one of the most important things anyone can do." Trade Minister Korth rippled thoughtfully. "So the question becomes, how do we proceed? The mineral wealth of that region could benefit all our civilizations. There are other nebulae," suggested Ambassador Krell. "Other sources of rare minerals that don't carry such significance," but Marcus held up his hand. "Actually, there might be a better solution. Your Majesty," he turned to address the Dragon Empress directly, "what if instead of mining the nebula, we helped you build something there?" Zarathis tilted her massive head. "What do you mean?" "A memorial," Marcus said, his excitement growing as the idea took shape. "Not just a monument, but a living archive. A place where other species could come to learn from your people's experiences, to understand their discoveries and wisdom. The mineral wealth could fund the construction, and in return, the galaxy gains access to knowledge that could benefit everyone." The Dragon Empress was quiet for a long moment, her star-bright eyes fixed on the holographic nebula. When she spoke, her voice carried wonder. "A bridge between the past and the future. A way for the dead to teach the living. It would require unprecedented cooperation," noted Chancellor Rixta, but her tone had shifted from objection to consideration. "And significant investment," added Trade Minister Korth. "But imagine the possibilities," said Emperor Vexthol, his agitation replaced by growing enthusiasm. "Access to dragon science, their philosophy, their art. The cultural and technological benefits could far exceed any mining profits." As the delegates began to discuss the practical aspects of Marcus's proposal, the Dragon Empress moved closer to where he stood. Her massive head lowered until she could speak to him privately. "You have given me something I thought lost forever," she whispered in the ancient tongue. "Hope that my people's memory will live on, that their voices will be heard." Marcus smiled up at her. "That's what humans do best, Your Majesty. We remember, and we help others remember too. It's how we turn the past into a foundation for the future." The conference continued late into the night, but the tone had fundamentally changed. Instead of negotiating for the right to exploit resources, the delegates found themselves planning the creation of something unprecedented. A living memorial that would preserve the wisdom of the past while building bridges between civilizations. As Marcus finally made his way back to his quarters in the early hours of the morning, he reflected on the strange turns life could take. A simple maintenance worker had helped save the memory of an entire civilization, all because he had learned to listen to voices that others couldn't hear. Behind him, the Dragon Empress began the long work of teaching the galaxy how to remember, and in the Kepler Nebula, the scattered dreams of billions waited patiently to be heard once more.